Good morning. We decided today we're going to do wrapping up some old business kind of a thing. We've kind of left a few things hanging, so we're going to clarify a few things over the last couple of weeks. And then 2 weeks ago, we had sent you the video on the machine quilting. We're going to tack on the third part of that at the end of this guy, so that we'll wrap that one up too. So a couple weeks ago when we did the needles, one of the needles that we talked about was the 60/8 needles that were good for applique. And I just wanted to clarify that it's not for like buttonhole applique. It's kind of a too fine needle for that. So what that was for was more an invisible applique, where you're using a clear monofilament thread or a 60 weight fine thread, one or the other, to do your applique, and you're doing invisible applique. So what we did is I pulled out, this is Riverside Knoll, which is Kim Deal's new, this is the sit and stitch project, the one that has, I think there's 6 installments to it. Not the little project, so this one is the 62x62, but if you notice that there is applique in a couple of the blocks in there. So that's what we're going to do now. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to talk real quick about invisible applique, freezer paper applique. Going to do it real short, so we're just going to kind of hit the highlights of the whole thing and then move on. So this is what the template that she gives you. And what I ended up doing is I just basically cut a piece of freezer paper 8.5 by 11, copied this onto the dull side of the freezer paper. So then when I cut it out, you've got your shape. So this is one of the leaves here. I have my fabric that I used, and I've got the shiny side up, and I just took a glue stick, a fabric glue stick, put a little dab on the back just so to hold it to the fabric enough so that it's not going to shift on me. And you remember when Terry did the starch applique a couple of weeks ago, she painted the edge. When you do the freezer paper, you don't have to, but that's why you want shiny side up. And again, if you had a travel iron, it's a little bit easier. You're just going to take the tip of your iron, and hopefully this is hot enough by now. I didn't give it much time. You're just going to kind of smooth it around.
Use a dry iron for this part,
and you want a dry iron. And you can see, as I say, it's not quite hot enough. Not quite hot
There's
enough.
a couple of different ways of using the freezer paper, because this way does the shiny side up.
Yes,
and then there's the other way that you can do the shiny side down.
But you're getting, it's part of it is sticking. New iron, what can I tell you? So this is going to stick the whole way around. The freezer paper is what's going to hold it. And then when you get your piece ready to go, you're ready to stitch. Now this is another one of the shapes that were on the pattern sheet, and I just wanted to real quick. You want to leave your seam allowance around, but then when you get into points like this, you want to make sure that you slice in. Okay? And then you also want to do some clipping into curves here. Hang on, we got to take a quick break. Okay, so then once you get your shapes ironed, you're ready to come to the machine and do the actual applique. Now I do have that 60/ needle in there. And remember, this is really fine, so it's going to make very small holes in your background fabric. The other things that I like using is a 60 weight thread, and I usually keep it pretty neutral. The grays, the tans, they really don't show hardly at all. And then when you...
Wait a minute, the other thing, you can use a silk thread too.
You can, in the bobbin?
Oh, I thought you were talking about the top, I'm sorry.
No, bobbin. This is in the bobbin. So then also remember that when you do that, if you have the finger on your bobbin case, you want to thread that up through, because that's going to give just that little extra tension that will pull any of the stitches right to the back. So once you have your block, all your pieces prepped, you're going to lay it out onto your background. And again, I just used a little bit of the glue stick pen just to stick it down. I mean, you can see the edges are still pretty loose, but it's not going anyplace on me. Now I've got clear monofilament thread in the top. Now, and just a quick brief little on this guy. This is a YLI thread. It's getting harder to find, so Superior is another nice brand. The thing that you want with the clear monofilament thread is you want to make sure that it is size 0.004. If it doesn't say it on the label, chances are it's not it. And anything that is not that is going to be fishing line.
And Marty, show them how it can break.
Oh.
It should break. It should break.
So you can't see it because it's nylon thread.
I know, but
you can see it breaks fairly easy.
You're not cutting your fingers when you're trying to do that.
It breaks kind of the same as regular thread does, very honestly.
And that does not to say that it's going to break in your quilt.
Right.
It's just if you have thicker it's going to not be good.
Right.
Not good.
That will age differently. So then now we're ready to do stitching on this one. Now remember, anytime you put clear monofilament on the thread, you want to drop your top tension. So
But if you thread your finger down on the bottom, you may
I
not.
still like doing it. But
See, ask two people, you get 3 opinions.
Yep. So anyways, I do drop it down a bit. Now,
Shouldn't you always do a test?
Yeah.
This is so weird. The numbers and stuff are flashing on the camera.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, this is flashing. Is
The
that
red.
flashing?
The red is, yeah.
It does. It does funky things. You want normally like an open-toed applique foot is what you want to use with this.
Can you take it off and?
Yep. So what it is you have clear vision into so you can see exactly where your needle is going. Plus it does have a cutout on the bottom of the foot so that you're kind of riding over the top of everything. But you really want that clear vision. And it's really weird because 100 years ago when we had Maureen Noble in to teach for us, she actually likes the 1/4-inch foot.
Yeah, I remember freaking out about that.
And it's funny, I do too. There's certain times that I really like it, and her whole logic behind it is if you look at the difference between these two, the 1/4-inch foot, you can still see where the needle is, but the foot or the part of the foot is actually holding the applique edge down as you go. You just have to be really super careful with this one because you've got to get your stitch width and your which really careful so that
Narrow.
it doesn't snap a needle when you're doing that.
Right.
But for today's purposes, we're going to go back to the open-toed applique foot just so you can see what we're doing too.
If you have a Bernine, it's the number 20 foot.
It is a number 20 foot. So let's see, I've got that in. Let me bring up my thread. Okay. So the stitch that you want to do is a blind hem stitch. So it comes in, it's stitches, and then goes over and does a catch stitch. So it's this guy right here. Okay. That's the one you're doing. First I had pointed that one, but it's not. I've got to get it going in the right direction.
Yeah,
but it's not on everybody's machine.
Right. But the pointy one, not the flat off one.
Right. Here, I'll stop the flickering. Yeah. But that's the guy that you want to go. And the thing is you want to set up your stitch width and your stitch length so that these little catch stitches are a little less than 1/4 of an inch apart. So that's what you, again, do that test when you first start so that you can get your machine set up to where you want it to be. So, what did I say? Grab that top thread. I'm going to select that one.
That's so freaking weird about that flashing.
I know with my machine that it's a stitch width of 1 and about a stitch length of a little less than 1/2. So we're doing very small, fine stuff.
And as we said, good idea to do a test piece.
Yes. Now when you start, I'm holding on to, I'm going to do the start kind of like I do the machine quilting. I'm going to start, grab my top thread, pull up my bobbin thread. But you can see too that the needle is on the edge of the applique, but in the background. It's not into the applique, okay? So
right next to the
right,
applique.
it's next to the applique. So we're going to bring up our bobbin thread, get that out of there. And then I'm going to just hand rotate it and make sure that I've got what I've got here. Actually, I'm going to move that back in the middle a little bit.
Yeah, this is where sometimes the movable needle position is very handy.
Because then you can actually see what you're doing. Okay, so now it's doing the catch stitch. So what I want to do, and if you can see where that is, I want the needle to just be catching the edge of the fold of the applique. So that's going to catch it, and then it's going to flip back and go back into my background again. So to do, I usually will do 3 catch stitches and then, or 3 straight stitches and then go over. And that's a little bit wide on the catch stitch, so I'm going to narrow that down just a little bit more.
This is why you do a sample piece.
Right.
And this can change. Different fabrics are different thicknesses.
Right.
So it's kind of, yeah, you get a general idea, but you need to do a quick test. Plus, you also want to make sure that your bobbin thread is not pulling up to the top, that you have good tension.
Now, when you get to a point, and I don't know if you remember a couple of weeks ago when Terry talked about when doing this with hand applique. So I'm here at the point now. I think that my next stitch is a catch stitch. No, one more. There we go. So I'm catching that point, and then I'm going to come back. Okay, got a little oops there.
Yeah.
That's okay. So what you're going to do is take your awl, and you're going to take that seam allowance, and you're just going to flip it under there, out of your way. Kind of hold it until you get stitched around the corner, and then you're ready to rock and roll more. Okay, so that kind of gives you, whoops, an idea. I want to show you what the stitch on the back looks like so that you can see how close the stitching is. You want those catch stitches pretty close. So, I mean, this is to mock hand applique. For those of us that don't like doing it by hand, we prefer doing it by machine. So anyway, so that's the use of the 60/8 needles. The whole point is to have that really small hole so that you don't make big holes. And it works really well with the clear monofilament thread. And if I don't know if you can do a close on that here, you can see it really is quite invisible. So anyway, so that kind of clears up what the 60/8 needles are for.
Now I just have to do one interjection here too. Because when you do this type of technique of applique, you do not want to leave that paper in there.
Right.
So what you would have to do after you're done is you would pop in there and you would cut out a little bit of the back.
Or depending on the size piece, I just make a slit.
Yeah, make a slit. And then you reach in there.
No, and what you do is you kind of pull it diagonally and it'll pop that glue bond.
That little bit of glue that you put on there.
It's hard because it's not all stitched down. And then you just pull this out. And that's why you don't want that catch stitch to be too big too, because if you're catching more of the fold than you should, you're also catching more of the paper and it's going to make it hard to pull out.
Right.
So you really just want to catch just the fold of the applique.
And I will say that if you use the Templar version of this, you don't have to take anything out of the back.
It doesn't hold the edge really nearly as nice. So
Well,
see, 2 people, 5
five
different
opinions. That's exactly right.
Okay, so that's the applique. That was the needles we wanted to clear up this week. So we're gonna. Oh, and then we had a quick little update with Kim Deal. We've got all of the kits are ready to go, except we're missing 2 fabrics. They probably won't be in until next week, but as soon as they are, we'll pop them onto the website so that those of you who want them can grab them. And then, so now we're just going to tack on that 3rd machine quilting thing, and that'll wrap that up too. And yay, I think we'll be caught up. So I think we're all set. See you next week.
Bye.
Okay, it's me again. I thought that as long as I was working on this quilt, I would do a follow-up part 2 to our tidbits from previously. So as I mentioned before, my first thing that I like to do is go through and do the grid work. So in between all of the block lines, that kind of thing, in the ditch, using with my walking foot. So I have done that, and I've done the borders also. So I did both sides of the border, and then I also ran like a basting line around the outside edge, just because again, that'll prevent this edge from flopping back and coming apart and all that good nonsense. So basically everything is really secured right now. I still do have pins in it, as you can see, but now I am ready to move on to free motion quilting. Da da da. And everybody has the strike of fear sliding down their spine right now. And this is maybe not the best size project to start out with, but free motion quilting is really great. But the thing is we tend to judge ourselves very harshly. So what I wanted to do is kind of give you again things that I like for the machine or the free motion machine quilting, and a couple of little tips before we start. Now the benefit to machine quilting is, say for instance, like on this block, if I want to stitch in the ditch, still, come and do on these guys, I can do that with my walking foot, but I would be turning the quilt and turning the quilt and turning the quilt. With the free motion quilting foot, see if I can do this one-handed. I'm just basically going to be moving it, and you can see I'm not having to turn, which is like huge. You're not fighting the big project. You're not having to battle it. I mean, let's face it, we don't have that huge of an opening unless you have a larger machine. This is just a regular conventional machine. But if you're having to fight a huge amount of bulk underneath that throat, I mean, you're got 10 strikes against you before you even start. So that to me is the benefit. I mean, a lot of people say, oh, but that's in the ditch work. It is, but you can still do it with your free motion foot. And it allows you to do it without having to do all the turning at the angles and all that good stuff. So to me, that's a really good thing to use your free motion foot for. Plus, it allows you to do still, you're following a line. So if you're fairly new to this, you can stitch along, you know, and again, use that clear monofilament thread again, which I still have on the machine. And again, it will take care of any of those boops that you do. You know, if you're not 100% on the line, the monofilament thread is really kind of lenient and doesn't show that. But that's a good way to start getting used to, you know, your movement of your hands and the movement of the quilt and the movement of your machine, is by doing that in the ditch work, but doing it with the free motion foot. A couple of things that I would not be without is a pair of quilting gloves. Now these are Machingers. I've had several pairs for several years. These are nice. They come in multiple sizes, but what I like about them is that they're very lightweight. I've tried other kinds of them, and I always come back to these guys. They just are golden. Back before they had done quilting gloves, you were always wearing latex gloves, and they were hotter than the hubs of you know what in the summertime. These guys, I can still thread my machine with these, but they have the rubber tip on the tips of the fingers, as you can see where all the grunge is. So that's allowing you to grip your quilt with tips of your fingers, and you're not having the stress in your shoulders as you normally would. And I just wanted to again suggest one other thing, and I'm sorry this is so boring because I'm on the back side of the camera. But one other thing that you want to take into consideration when you are doing your setup for your quilting is be in a chair that is tall enough so that you're not like sitting down here. You want to be able to, when you put your hand on your table, your elbow is at like a 90-degree angle. So you want to be sitting up fairly high, because the reason is that raises your shoulders up to your ears. And all that is going to do is cause stress and strain, and you're going to have a headache. And no, wine is not a great thing to have while you're doing machine quilting. I don't care what people say. So anyways, Machingers are great because, again, they're taking that stress out of your shoulders. They come, I think, in an extra small, medium, large, extra large, and we have those on the website, plus a downloadable paper that you can, because they do measurements for your hand. And when you try them on, you want them to be snug but not cutting off your circulation. Let's see if I can get one on here. Put my thumb in the right hole here. So you want them tight because you don't want them slipping on you, but you don't want them so tight that they're cutting off your circulation. Actually, in the summertime, I do kind of where I have here, I roll up the thing so that they aren't over my wrists. It just is a little bit more comfortable. But like I said, I can, if I have to stop and go do something around the house, I can still do that. I can still thread my finger because I still have very good dexterity with my fingers. So Machingers are a great thing to do. Another thing is, don't be afraid to do marking as you go along. This is a sew line marker. It comes with both a white lead, which I think is what's in here. Yes, a white lead, and that comes in multiple colored other leads too. But this way, you know, you can go in and do some marking if you need to. If you wanted to do kind of like, you know, a scroll on here, you can come in and do that line. You know, again, something for you to follow. A blue washable marker is also a great thing to do. You know, if you wanted to come in and do a point like this, you can just use your regular ruler to mark your lines, but it gives you something to follow again. When I get out to the outside edge, I think I'll have to stop, but I'll show you how I'm going to do a stencil on the outside border too. But that's just something else I wanted to just kind of start with you. Oh, but this was the other thing. Okay, so when you're starting with your free motion quilting, I think I tried doing this with just one hand, but and I was successful. One of the things that you really want to train yourself into, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to echo around this so you can kind of see. This circle is going to be my guide, so I'm just going to run that around the edge. But what you want to do when you're starting, I got to grab my thread again here. I lost it. Where did you go, silly thread? Okay. What I want to do is I'm going to hold on to my monofilament thread here, and to start, I'm going to bring up that bobbin thread. So you can see what I'm doing is with pulling it away, I'm grabbing that bottom thread and pulling it up through. So then now when I go back, what I can do, drop my needle again here, is I'll take a couple of just plain stitches very, very close together. And then when I get far enough away, I'll just clip that off. You really want to make sure that you bring up that bobbin thread, either that or you're going to be diving underneath your quilt and trying to find it, or you're going to have all these tags underneath it. This way, when I get far enough away from it, I can go back and I can just clip that off, and I don't have to be dumpster diving on the back side of my quilt to get those lost threads done in there. And then okay, let's say if I've quilted a little bit here. See, I'm using the edge. This is not easy to do with that number one without my fingers and number two one-handed. So let's say I wanted to end there. So I'm going to do the same process that I just did. So I'm going to bring my needle up. I'm going to pull the fabric away, and you can see I've got that top thread. Grab a little bit of that. I'm going to go back to where I started. I'm going to take one more stitch. And then when I pull it away again, just see the bobbin thread is coming up. This way again, I can clip it off right at quilt level there. And then I don't, again, have to be diving underneath the quilt to get that clipped away. So there's just a couple little more tips that I wanted to show you. Hopefully there will not be a part 3. This is just a 1 and a 2-parter. But we'll talk about machine quilting again. Have fun, and don't forget, be brave. Be brave and try it. I'm sure you will succeed. Bye.